such items every day. Right. We have 45 minutes. I'm going to introduce shortly myself and then ask our two speakers to introduce themselves, and then just start with some reflection or some ideas about these items. Okay? What do you think?
Good.
That's nice. Right.
Yeah.
Right. So about myself, I'm a life and career coach working since 2015. I have been cooperating with Empower Amsterdam now for 3.5 years. And I've been working with job seekers or people between jobs, or just explorer of new and wider horizons and challenges of their careers. So are mostly situation of orientation or questions, deep question or practical question about how to move to the next step in their own career. I'm a person-centered coach, working with the models of, I like to work with the model of sub-personalities and archetypes and their own leading intuition. I love the leading intuition. I love the intuition of everybody, actually. I follow the idea that everybody has a special talents and gifts, and which actually wants to be lived out and expressed and mostly share with others. And it depends on the period of life and in the phase of life where people are. But doing this is a really good way of feeling deep fulfillment in their own life. Right. This is actually the idea that I share. And in my role as coach, I've this honor to take part to this transition moment, to this orientation moment, and I really love it, and I'm really thankful for this. Right. So far about me. That's not that much interesting. More about you. Kobi Ampoma, a professional recruiter with a long experience. Would you like to introduce yourself, please?
Yes. Thank you, Stefania. So I have 20 years experience in HR, and the last 12 years has predominantly been in the recruitment space, where I was in-house recruiter supporting different businesses, obviously dealing with a lot of international people. So and I'm very passionate about that. I think being able to provide people opportunities who can add value to a company and make the company either increase their bottom line. We need people for that, and also I think that's one of the best jobs to have in HR is when you can bring in talent. So that's what I've been doing for the last 12 years, and I'm very passionate about that.
Right. Oh, nice to hear. What is your background? Where do you come from, let's say?
Well, originally I'm from Ghana, so I came to the Netherlands when I was 11 years old. My dad was a political refugee, so obviously, in the Netherlands, integrating into a new country, speaking or learning a new language, and then going through the educational system to get a professional career. My dad and my mom were big advocates of education, so that had always been instilled in the family to make sure that you do some kind of education. It doesn't have to be the highest education, but at least have an education so that you can stand on your own 2 feet. So that has been a key drive in the family, and I also believe in second chances. If I look at myself, being a political refugee, getting a chance in the Netherlands, I was able to make the best out of myself. So that is something that I'm sometimes conscious biased about when I talk with candidates as well.
All right. How interesting. Okay. Do I hear you saying such a kind of own experience? It leads or helps or take parts to the conversation you have with candidates. Is it?
For sure, because as looking at everybody has a filter, right? So I try to have a filter as thin as possible, to make sure that I don't really judge or try to judge people, because you need to have that conversation first before I can judge. I've learned from somebody who's very old who said, you know what, when you meet somebody, you start with a white canvas, and then as you continue to have a conversation, you can fill out the canvas. So that's what I also try to do with candidates. I can make assumptions, but I try to have the conversation first before I can, really have those assumptions.
Right. Okay. Yeah. Oh, interesting. Absolutely. Marjolijn, thank you for being here. Would you like to introduce yourself to us?
Sure. Yeah. Marjolijn Vlug. I mainly help people communicate with businesses, mainly when they're applying for a new job. And I also help businesses communicate with the people that work in their organizations. I have a background in HR, communications, and hospitality. Work with non-profits and for-profits. And right now the coaching I do is mainly with international people on the Dutch job market, and also with people who are very multi-passionate, multi-potentialite, slashies, have done lots of things, appreciate and enjoy lots of things. And who are interested in how to communicate all that they bring to their future employer. Right. I love that. Super interesting.
Right, I can imagine. How did you came to, or how was it? What happened so that you started to work with international people?
I have a completely Dutch background. I'm fully 100% Dutch parents, grew up in the Netherlands, and I love stories. I love other people's experiences, and I've studied abroad, made friends from abroad, would love to visit them and live in their houses and experience life the way they live it. And all throughout my life, I've always been interested in what's it like for you.
Right.
So as soon as I started working as a career coach, those are the people that found me most helpful, and that felt like, I get that. I get that your perspective is completely different because you're from that completely different culture. And when we talk about applying in the Dutch context, then maybe that's interesting for you to know, because you come from such a completely different place and have such a different perspective. So I find it very interesting. I'm open to it, and that makes people appreciate working with me, I guess.
Absolutely, yeah. I can imagine, and I think it's a quite interesting situation. So you support people for going to interview, is it? Support and work with them, and at the same time, yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, true. It's. I should support people in all the facets and all the phases of communicating when you're looking for a new job. So that can be from writing your letter, your LinkedIn profile, your CV,
Right.
your resume, to going for interviews and even negotiating for the terms of benefits. And I also help organizations do the same thing in reverse, communicate with candidates and with employees. And it's interesting to see both sides and to work with both sides, because it's easier for me to explain to an organization, this is how a candidate views the situation, because I just spoke to one yesterday. And then it's easier to work to coach people and say, okay, this is how a recruiter might perceive your CV, because I was just working with one, last week.
Okay, and in my opinion, we have really lots of interest elements we can discuss about. We are talking about internationality and with linked to Dutch market. We are talking about communication, and there are a lot of forms of communication. So, as you're saying, letter, CV, LinkedIn, and an interview. And we are talking about which kind of role plays education in the life of a candidate, which how do people, recruiter, companies and candidates themselves, how do they look at education? And right, okay, I would say a lot of interest elements we can just pick out in our conversation. Maybe we can start from the first idea of this evening. This is Iceberg, the model of Iceberg thinking. I think meaning Iceberg as full yourself, the full yourself. So how can you express and represent yourself in an interview? And maybe we can first look at this item from the perspective of the candidates, but maybe it's also not that bad to remember that the same situation is from the point of view of the interviewer. So the one who is going to interview is also busy with show himself or not during the interview, isn't it? Right, but okay, so far. Kobi, what are your thoughts about this idea? Iceberg, show yourself in an interview.
I think it's an interesting perspective, and the reason why is that, if you look at the two spectrum, as a candidate, ideally you want to show what you bring to the table, right? And from a company or an interview perspective, you want to assess what somebody is bringing to the table. So you're not always inclined to show your best self because you are focused on what is the individual bringing. What I tell people that I work with or I speak to who are looking for advice is that I talk about it's very important to do three things in the interview. So first of all, it's very important to understand the job that you apply for. Do you have a good sense what you are going to do, right? So if you don't, and you still get the opportunity to come interview, I always use a percentage. So you read an application, you think, hey, I can do this job, but maybe it's only 50% that you understand. So in your interview, you need to increase that percentage, right? So how can I increase that percentage? So that's one thing. Secondly, I think it's very important to also think about how you will articulate your added value. Because by articulating your added value, then the interview can assess what are you going to bring to the table. And then the third one that I always talk about is, leave something from yourself behind. So in an hour or 45 minutes of conversation, the interview needs to think about, okay, I spoke to Kobi, he asked a lot of questions about the role, so there's a lot of interest there. Typically, the answer that they give you, you can also say, oh, if you're working with an ATS system, which is an application tracking system, I have experience with that. So sometimes based on your question that you ask, the answer that you give, you can also highlight that you have some kind of experience around that. And then, who is Kobi? So I want you to leave a conversation thinking, hey, I spoke to him, he showed a lot of interest, I know what he can bring, and I also know I have an idea who he is. Right? You don't always have to share your life story, but at least you have a sense of who you are. That's my breakdown of what I share with people all the time.
Right. Really interesting. Thank you very much for this. Okay, so do I understand you correctly? Are you saying three things? Keep in mind three things. First of all, what are you going to do? What is the job about? What is the vacancy about? Right. How do you think you can cover 50% or 70%? Right. You think it. So use the situation of the interview in order to check if you got the right 70%. And if it's the case, improve the chance that you get the missing 30%. Is it correct?
Yes, a little bit nuances, because if you understand 50% of the job, right, based on your interview, you should have received answers which will give you a better idea of what you are actually going to do, right? So it increases your chances. And how many interviews do you normally have? You normally will have 2 or 3 interviews. So if your first interview you have 50% idea of what you're going to do, the second one you should have maybe 70% or 80% based on the information you were able to gain in the first interview. That's what I mean by that. And then the answer that you get, you use it as a hook to showcase your talent or your added value to the company.
Okay, great stuff. Okay. Right. So the second step would be what is my added value is related to the position, to the skills, to what is required. Okay, this is what you are asking companies. So, and this is me. This is my experience. I can do this. I can do that. I know this. I can do this. Okay. And this is all still on the level of the skills and on the level of the content of the content of the position.
Correct.
Right. And the third point I heard you saying, if I'm correct, is leave something back of yourself.
Yes. So
Right.
so if people would describe you after the interview, they need to know something. So for me, I always, when I interview myself, I will share that I'm family orientated. I love sports. I'm all about team and give examples around that. So although I added my value, you also know something personally about me, right?
Right.
Because at the end of the day, what I've learned is that when people are working with you, they want to work with people who they also know a little bit, right?
Right.
So I
Sure.
think that is important.
Okay. Nice to hear. Great. Thank you so much. Marjolijn, what were your thoughts, your first thoughts when you read that we are going to talk about Iceberg represent your full yourself in an interview conversation?
I really love the metaphor, the image of an iceberg, because it can feel like an iceberg when you're being interviewed. You can only share the
Right.
top bit of what you offer, who you are, and everything. And because you only have 45 minutes on average, and it's not just you talking. And one really key thing that I work on with my clients is to really choose the key things that you want to put into those 45 minutes. So, for example, when you introduce yourself, you can give the interviewer the whole chronological order of your life. I was born here, and then I'm that, and then I went to that school, and then I did that and that and that. But it's that is the average normal thing to do, which most people naturally revert to. But if you pick a few key things about yourself that they really want to know, that is super relevant to them, that is relevant to the job. So what Kobi just said about, there he is pointing in the right corner. What Kobi just said about finding out at least 50% of the job that you'll be doing and then expanding on that and finding out more makes it easier to pick the key things that are most relevant for them to know about you and why you're a good match for what they need. So if you start with that and add a few personal details, and I don't know, the fire alarm goes off, Wi-Fi goes down, everything goes haywire. They have the most important things after the first 5 minutes, and that's what you can always dive in deeper. But that's the point where people are most focused, when people can remember everything, and if anything goes wrong, then at least you've said the most important things about you. So then the feeling of, oh, there's a whole iceberg beneath me, you have that feeling less. Or when after 45 minutes the interview is over and you think, oh, I should have said that. Everything you want to say, start with the key things.
Right.
And that I believe that's a good way to reduce that icebergy feeling of stress about interviews. I think that's a very important thing to reduce people's stress about interviews, and that's one of them. Yeah.
Right. So, do I understand you correctly? Are you saying once you have read the job descriptions and you see, okay, you're a candidate, you would like to apply for the position. You see there are common elements between the position and your CV or the skills you have, right? And when you are in the interview, use the first minutes in order to highlight the reason why you would be a good candidate for the position. Is it what you're saying?
Yes, but there's probably more that they want to know about you, the kind of person that you are, the main things that you're good at, and that does not have to be super tailored to the job ad. It can be slightly more general, but you know, this is the things that you know that you're good at, that you want them to know about you. It can,
right.
it can be about the job, about the vacancy, and it can be a bit broader than that as well. And I love Kobi's suggestion as well to introduce a few personal things.
Right. So you start with what's your added value, anyhow. So what you think, and if you refer to your CV, don't take it all the chronological CV of the last 15 years, but what is relevant from your CV, from your skill for this position, and
Yep.
say actively as soon as possible. Are you saying this?
Yeah, you could, for example, say, I'm Marjolijn, I'm great at communications. I have a lot of experience in HR and in coaching. I really love working with international people. Well, I live in Amsterdam. I have 2 small kids who sometimes wake up, and I hope they won't right now because we're in this conversation.
Right. Okay, this is normally when in an interview you get the chance to introduce yourself. It's
Yeah,
normally after
very
the
often you
frame.
get.
Right. Okay.
Yep.
Yes. I'm following you now. Now, great. Okay. Nice. Nice to know. That's great. Okay. So are we saying the first? This is the situation is an interview. So it means it is about. It is about a position, it's about skills, it's about experience, what you can do, it's systems, it's not, it's people's communication, everything, right? So, and then you keep yourself busy with those, and you bring those contents actively as soon as possible. So you are done. Let's say if everything happens, you have saved.
Gave them the highlights. Yeah. You can always
Right.
dive. You will. You know, if the interview goes well, you dive in more and more and more and more. It's sometimes it's a bit like going on a first date as well. You know, when you're meeting someone, it's a blind date or it's a first date. You don't want to give the person your whole life story because they'll think, well, it's just a first date. You just give them a few funny anecdotes and make them hungry for more and make them want that second date, if you want to.
Okay, right.
So, give them highlights.
Right. Yes, I do understand this. I'm just trying to figure out or to imagine this model of the iceberg. And so are we saying, for example, by the question, what needs to be brought from below the surface? So are we saying the candidate may choose actively to address something? Or do I wait for be asked about something? What do you think, Kobi?
I think, my analogy that I use in terms of, asking questions, that really helps to get some insights, and then you can explore and play with that, right?
Right.
And I, not because it's me, but I think ideally, in all the interviews, in terms of the follow-ups that I have with hiring managers, we are assessing a few things. So did the candidate do a good enough job to highlight those things so that we can make an assessment, right? So that is something that I think every candidate should think about, is behind the scenes, what are we going to talk about was important, right? So typically is, can he or she do the job, right? So we need to be able to see, based on the conversation, that, examples were given that we feel that the person can do the job. Or do we see potential? Does the person have a lot of transferable skills that we think can be utilized here, right? So depending on, you are either applying for a job which is one-on-one or something which is totally different, think about what people are going to be assessing, right? And then what I think is very important, people talk about cultural fit or cultural add, being part of an organization. Do they know enough about me, snippet wise, to say, hey, we see Kobi walking around here?
Right. Right. This is really interesting. Right. So, in for me, in my opinion, it's really interesting what you're saying about the potentiality. Right. So we covered now, okay, the skills, and you apply for a position, and because you would like, you think you have the skills, and you course the requirements, and then, but the new part now is the potentiality. So you are. So are we saying, is it possible to apply for new positions, a position I've never covered up to now in my career, but where I see myself doing this, and what I need to do in the interviews is to present myself so transparently, so that also the company can see the potentiality between of me doing this position or doing this job. Is it?
Exactly. And
Right.
one of
Oh,
the,
this is interesting.
one of the things that I advise candidates is that, if you want to transition into sales, right, and you've never done sales before, my question that I will always ask is, do you have friends in your network who do sales?
Right.
And have you spoken to them? Because if you have not, then it means that you're not really interested in doing sales.
Yeah.
Right. It's
Right.
perfect.
So I always believe that people have a network of people who are in different fields.
Sure.
So have the dialogue. So, hey, Kobi, I'm interested in being a recruiter. What does a recruiter do? Right. And I 100% believe if you talk to 5 recruiters, you would have an idea what a recruiter is supposed to do. Right. And
Right.
if you get an opportunity to have a conversation about that, how do you then transfer this information onto somebody to say, you know what? Although you don't have experience, I see that you've done all the things that is needed to show that you have motivation, that you are willing, and maybe I would like to give you a chance.
Great.
Right? Because
Fantastic. Right.
because in our careers, nobody is doing exactly what they maybe studied for or started in their career. So it's all about how do you make sure that the other person sitting opposite you believe that you can bring something to the table, or have done your research, or have done all the things that you need to do to say, you know what, I believe in this kid, or I believe in this guy or girl, and I'm going to give them a chance.
Great. Right. Absolutely. We don't belong anymore to the generations of people who will have one position in one company for the whole life. So we don't, and that's it. So take it and go with this. That's it. That's the message. Right.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. Thank you so much. So are we also saying candidates who would like to start a new career, please make your homework, and make your homework first, one activity, one exercise, which is quite practical to do, is approach people who are in this business and ask them questions in order to find out what is actually the business, the position, the jobs, and also in order to give yourself the possibility to find out, do I like it really? Is it something for me? Is it?
Yes.
Really great,
Yes.
really interesting, Holly.
Because if you get an opportunity to interview, it means they saw potential. So
Right.
that is your chance to then convince an individual to really give you the job or the opportunity.
Great. That's nice. That's nice to know. Exactly. If you come to an interview, you have been chosen. It means something said to the interview. Okay, you might be the good candidate. Great. Marjolijn, now we want, let's say, use your experience between from the perspective of the company. What's your experience? How often do you see this happening, or have you seen happen that potential candidates or in new industry approach and started a new career or new position?
I think that varies widely between organizations. When I see, for example, when I see government organizations, they are very strict on, if you want this job, you need to have that education. If one person told me, if you want an HR job with us, you're going to have to do that full 4-year HR degree, otherwise no chance.
Okay.
With other organizations, it's about completely different things. So this is, it's also interesting to find that out from your network. The HR person in that government organization was the mother of a friend. So I just, my friend said, you should talk to my mom sometime. And I talked to her. So I learned that that's the perspective that type of organization would have when they see my profile. And in a completely different organization, they were super excited to have me. The first time I started in HR, I didn't have any HR experience, but the hiring manager and the recruiter were interviewing me for a different role. And the recruiter said, we need someone in my department. I think you'd be really fun there.
Right.
Yeah, sure. And before I went in for the interview for that role, like Kobi said, I leveraged my network. So I didn't know any HR people directly, but I called a friend and she said, my friend is in HR, you should call her. So I called that friend, who was a bit nervous, but I did anyway. And she told me, like, I read to her what the role entailed, and she told me what that meant. And that helped me to the next day, confidently say to this new organization, I would love this opportunity. And I have these skills, transferable skills that I can transfer and use
Right.
and for the benefit of your company.
Right.
I have the business degree, I have the interest in people, I have all these other skills that I will use. So I did my research, I looked at my transferable skills, and that was the type of company that really appreciated the other things that I brought in, because the HR stuff I could learn on the job, and I did an extra training on the side. But the core skills that I brought in, those were the ones they were interested in. And I just happened to get them somewhere else in my other previous experience and education.
Right.
Maybe to add to this, Stefania,
Sure.
one of the key things I like about recruitment is that you can speak to an individual and think, I think this role is actually maybe better or suited for you based on the conversation that we are having, right?
Mhm.
And I think those are the great recruiters, because they see the potential, they understand the organization, and they see like, hey, if we can add this person to our company in this particular role, I think he or she will excel. But then again, like Marjolijn mentioned, she did her homework, right?
Right.
So it could have been that she went into a conversation thinking, well, the recruiter told me to come have a conversation, here I am.
Yeah.
Right? So
Okay.
yeah. So I think that sometimes people also don't leverage that opportunity that they have, right?
Absolutely.
And by talking to maybe one or two people, you at least have an idea. Okay, now that I know what HR is about, okay, I may like it or I may not like it, but at least I can have a conversation. So I think what Marjolijn mentioned is really spot on, and I think that's one of the key things that people should do for sure.
Great. That's good. That's good. Then we can write down in our notes, be authentic, to be transparent, and to do your homework. Now, so better you do your homework before, and then you be transparent after this way around. Working with potential candidates and people between jobs, I know, for example, answers of people who are job seekers, and quite often are fears, and people are afraid to show themselves completely, as we are talking about now. And do you have any idea what we could, so if we have some thoughts which could trigger those insecure, unsure people to do the step and to do it? I know myself. So when I suggest the exercise of networking to approach people you maybe know not that well, but you may approach, I get quite often the answer, yes, but why would a person, an unknown person, take the time to talk to me? right? So, and I often have the answer and say, you know what? If you do it, if you yourself, you do it for a couple of persons, you will be happy to receive it. So if you receive it once, next time you will be asked to do this, you will also do it. And you may think that on this world, there's a lot of people who ask and be asked. So no, don't be afraid and do it, right? Can I explain what I mean? Which kind of thoughts could we have about the transparency? If you have done your homework, don't worry and just show yourself. Or we are going, in my opinion, about the the part under the water in the iceberg, right? So what do you think? Kobi, sorry, what do you think? Or
I think, you know, there are a few sides that you can explain this. So one is, if no, let me do it this way. Whenever you approach somebody that you like to ask a question about the company or position, I always look at it this way. If somebody is asking you, hey Kobi, how it is to work at your company, and you like it, you are always going to answer back, right? Plus, sometimes there's also a benefit for, you know, employees from a referral perspective. If you refer somebody to the company, there could be a monetary incentive for you as well. So what I always say is that if you really like your job or like the company you work for, you would spend 5 or 10 minutes speaking to somebody who's interested in also working there, right?
Great.
But when it
Yes.
comes to more the job content, that is much more leveraging your network, because if you love what you do, at parties you talk about what you do. Is I say it's the same thing. So if you ask me at a party, hey Kobi, what do you do? I can speak 4 hours, right? And I have stories for days.
Exactly. That's it.
And I think it's similar to when people get approached. It's a little bit of you know, being seen as an expert or somebody who can share knowledge. And I always think, you know, if you can share knowledge which is not costing you anything, why wouldn't you do that? Right? But
Exactly.
that's my personal approach. So I try to help as much people as I can, and I think that others are also open to doing that.
Right, thank you so much. Yes, I see. Okay, I hear you saying that's your personal approach, and I can add that's also my personal experience. I always, the times that I dared to ask unknown people, I always got an answer. And it was maybe not now, or please schedule a meeting. And the most surprising situation were when I got a positive answer that I thought, oh, it's going to happen in this way. Right. Marjolijn, what's your experience about this?
Well, I a very different part of what you said spoke to me, and that is that you know, how much of yourself can you show? And I very firmly feel and believe that you get to be you, and you're great as you are. And you're looking for a job and an employer and a workplace that appreciates who you are, because otherwise you won't be happy working there and they won't be happy with you. So you get to be you, and you know, you don't have to bring your worst days every time, but you know, you're fine as you are. So don't be afraid to bring that and to be open about that.
Right.
You deserve a workplace that appreciates you.
Right. I can, that's absolutely, yeah, I absolutely agree with what you're saying. I experienced in some phases of my career, I was on the position of the interviewer. And I do remember that in a couple of interviews, I was more nervous than the candidate, because I was doing interviews for a position, the content I didn't know exactly about. And I was wondering, and what if the candidate is going to know more about me? So which kind of situation is going to be? So I was thinking, oh, shame on you. And it was great, because since then, every time I had an interview, I was thinking, what if the one is also thinking the same as I did in the one situation, you know? Yeah, sometimes it's also a point of, okay, how do you prepare yourself? How do you prepare yourself in for such a situation? I'm just seeing Right. I just see a question in the panel, and this is from Shia, and she's asking, but what can you really bring? But can you really bring your whole self? I'm sorry. Right. You're seeing the question too. What do you think, Marjolijn? What do you think?
Well, I love the question, and I have to say Shay's not bringing her whole self, because that's not her in the picture. She's an adult woman.
That's for sure.
I go back to the metaphor that I used earlier of going on a first date. You wouldn't show everything about yourself on the first date. I mean, you would hold in a fart. You wouldn't. You would eat politely. You would be a nicer side of yourself. And everyone will understand that there's more about you that you will bring, that they'll find out in a month or so, that you'll get to talking about in 3 months or whatever. That just happens because you live your life together as you work together. So in an interview, you mainly bring the nicest parts, just like you would on a first date.
Right.
But that is, those are the most important things about you. You wouldn't hide your favorite hobby, for example. I think that wouldn't be wise, because, if you're meeting someone who hates puppies and you love puppies, then you wouldn't be happy together, because you love puppies and you don't want to live without them. So the key things are always, the main things about yourself, and then all the, the evil stepmother stuff in the back that you don't want them to know about. They'll find out later.
So there's always time enough to show your less fortunate days of the year.
If it proves to be a good match, then you'll get to talk about that later. Yeah, but the most important things do need to come up. But the most important things about you need to come up in the first interview round, I think.
Yeah. Kobi, how do you see this? What do you think about the question?
I think it's a great question indeed. I think you don't bring your whole self, but I do think that we all have worked with people who are not nice people, and they got the job there as well. So if they would have brought your whole self, then they probably wouldn't have gotten that job.
That's a good one. Yes, thank you. Right.
So I think generally speaking, you would like to, and I think it comes back to what Marjolijn says. You would like to work for a company that appreciates you as an individual, right? Whatever flaws you potentially have. I'm a true believer is that everybody who's working for a company want to do good, generally speaking, and want to add value to the company. So you bring the self that you think, hey, based on my conversation, people will know a little bit about me. If I've gone through 3 divorces, I'm not going to share that per se with you, but you know that, hey, I'm a family man. These are the things that are important to me. And then, when you get the opportunity, then you open up yourself a little bit more, right? So I think to an interview, you bring the self that you would like to represent and that you think is important for them to know, because you also want to be authentic. If I'm smiling, during my interview, and I get the job, and I come and I don't smile at all, that's also a little bit strange, right? So you want to bring a little bit of yourself.
Right. Okay, let's explore a couple of other situations or things which might not be the easiest one for candidates. For example, gaps in the CV. What do you think? Do you both know the interview situation? What's your experience with this? What have you seen? What's your idea? What's your opinion about this? Kobi.
I think it can go both ways. So I think if you have a gap in your resume and it doesn't come up in the interview, address that. Because I've seen that managers sometimes have their own assumptions, but the question was never asked.
Right.
So if that's the case, you bring it up, the reasons why you decided to take that gap, whatever reason it is. I think it says much more about yourself, but also it gives a little more context. Because I've been in a lot of situations where the manager said, but there's a gap in the CV, and I don't understand if there is motivation or whatever. But we never asked that question, right? And then I have to say, well, I spoke to the candidate and they indicated, after 5 years of working, they'll find it very important to take a break, for 6 months and just explore. And some managers may think, how do you stop a job from 5 years and then decide to explore? You don't know what somebody's going through and what is important to them at that point in time. So I think it's very important to address that. And that's what I meant with, if something is unclear about your CV or background, clear it up, because I think it's better if you do.
Right. Okay, really interesting. So be active and be aware if it's something that makes you unsure about having a gaps in the resume, speak it up and bring it so that you can write. Okay, that's interesting. So that you can talk about it and it's clear. It's clear, maybe more for yourself than for the interviewer, but it doesn't matter. You have done for yourself.
Yes.
Right. It's also a way of bringing your whole self, in my opinion, in the interview, because this could mean respect your being unsure about something and then bring it up and represent it. Right. Okay.
Yeah.
Nice. Right. What do you think, Marjolijn?
Yeah, I love that Kobi saying this, because I do know that, whatever you don't address, if a question comes up with the recruiter, with the hiring manager, at a point when you're not communicating with them, more times than not, people will think of an answer to that question that is negative. So they'll tend to fall towards the negative answer that is possible from their perspective, because they don't know. So if you fill that in before they even get the question, and you fill that in with a positive answer, then they don't even get to, there's so much less room for them to make up a negative story about it.
Okay.
And any gap you have that feels like a gap to you because you feel unsure about it, it's not a gap, because things happen in your life. You learned, you got experiences. Anything that happened to you brought you valuable life experiences. So you can talk about those and talk about what you learned, what you gained, what you bring from what happened then to where you are now. That helps you out, that benefits them, that makes you a better candidate for the position. When you've relocated to a new country, for example, you can say you were determined or you were creative in finding solutions for crazy problems that suddenly happened. When you traveled, you could say you experienced different cultures and you're very comfortable with working with international people, international clients. When you've cared for a family member, for example, you can say you practiced resilience and patience. You're good at caring. You're very reliable. You can give all these things that you learned, that you got better at, or that you learn about yourself that you already had but you just didn't realize, that are very positive. There's so many positive things to say as soon as you start looking at it as life experience rather than a gap. It's never a gap unless you were in a coma. That's a gap.
Okay, great.
And that's another story. That's also could be a great story, but that's, I would call that maybe a gap. But everything else is just life experience that brought you something.
That's nice. That's nice. Thank you so much. So do I hear you saying, okay, a gap in a resume, it means a period without maybe working or having a position, but doesn't mean that you haven't learned something, you haven't experienced something, you haven't done something. So please, note what you have done and translate it to a work situation. So something like that you have and that you can use in the work situation. Are you saying this?
Mm-hmm. Yep, certainly. And what I'm reading, the question from Shay that I'm reading here is, what if it's a gap due to redundancy, like during COVID? You can say how much you learn, whether you kept up with the professional things that were happening, the stuff that were happening in your profession. You can talk about what you learned about having kids at home, homeschooling. You can talk about, your own resilience, about how you overcame a stressful period. There's so many things that will be happening to you right now when you're when you're not employed, but you're still experiencing things and learning things, whether it's about, you know, the work that you normally do, keeping that up, just reading articles and reading books or anything, or the life experience that you're having.
Right. So like, and the second part of the question says, and you don't get a new job for a long time because of the COVID, right? So, and I'm thinking actually, right. So, but on, sorry, there's another question and I got interrupted. Yeah, it's great. So, and right, and so, and you don't get a new job for a long time. So, right, and I would say only the fact that you are in an interview after such a long time just means that you kept on working in this period. The COVID period in redundancy means it's a underwater working period, isn't it? I mean, it's, you are working, you are preparing yourself for the next chance. But it's a period where everything is, or a lot of silence, and you have to find other ways in order to keep active in networking, in order to otherwise, or you are orientating yourself in another industry or learning something and doing some education online, for example, but also only remaining active and active with about the item, finding a position and applying for a position, I would say.
Yeah, volunteering can be a thing, or just, you know, or just
Right.
surviving is great. Sometimes the year we've had, if you've survived, good for you, you know, that's enough too.
Absolutely.
And even
Absolutely.
if you don't get a job for a long time, because that was the other question that Shay had, I worked with someone who wasn't employed by a company for 10 years.
Right.
And they were very excited about a specific role because it was the right thing at the right time, and they were great for it, and they got the job.
This is
And
possible
they talked
too.
about everything
Right.
that they'd done over the past 10 years, which was not being paid by a company, but still doing loads of things, important things, good things, personal things. And the main thing was that they understood what the company needed, and they could offer that, and they got hired. So it doesn't really matter how long the gap is. And that's my perspective. And I'm really curious to hear from Kobi as well. I'm sorry I've been talking so long because I want to hear what your perspective is.
No. You know, I think the key thing is when you talk about gaps in people's CV, everybody understands COVID. Everybody understands financial crisis. So
Yes.
there are a few key things that everybody understands. You know, and unfortunately, you know, even in 9/11, people understood that certain industries were impacted. So if you have a gap because of that, it's much more easy to explain.
It's quite
If
easy, isn't it? Right.
Yeah, but if it's not, you know, based on one of these things, then it becomes a much more of a challenge. So that's why I think it's important for you to then bring it up. And just to piggyback on what Marjolijn said, then it's very important to showcase what have you been doing
Right.
during the time that you have not been part of a workforce, right?
No.
So I think that's how I would try to explain that.
Right.
Yeah.
It's great.
And that could be any kind of thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. Right. I'm checking the time. We are enjoying our time together, as I can say from my side, as we have something like 6-7 minutes left. Do you think, based on your experience and expertise, are we missing something really essential or important of the situation of the interview? We are trying to cover what I would call blind spots for candidates in an interview. So we said, yeah, what can be difficult in an interview? What can be, I call it difficult, embarrassing for a candidate. What could you think, Ed? What do you think? Kobi, sorry.
No, I think we've covered a majority of the things that is important. I think the challenge is, you know, when you get rejection time and time again, then the resilience part comes in, and you start to maybe, you know, doubt yourself. What I try to tell people is that, you know, your opportunity will come. You know, all these interviews is a preparation for the next one. So, you know, sometimes people do see through you because you have not been employed for 6 months. You're very nervous, and then the words doesn't come out of your mouth. So it all happens to the best of us. So keep on practicing. Take every opportunity as a chance to prove yourself time and time again, and you will succeed. Because I have so many stories of people who have gotten opportunities because they were persistent. So I think that's what I'll leave the audience with as well. I know it's challenging, but just keep on being persistent and leverage your network, because there's always, nowadays, when it comes to referral, there's always people in your network who can help you, either with insights, or we can help you by giving a recruiter a call. So I always share that with people as well.
Yeah, great. Marjolijn.
Excellent. That's really excellent. Yeah, one thing that is the very last thing I'll mention is something that you can Google, because we don't have time to address it anymore. And that's called the STAR structure for answering questions during an interview. The most important thing to prepare is how do you introduce yourself, and that STAR structure, because as soon as you know that structure, you can answer any question because you have all the information in your head. All you need is a structure to give a proper answer, and not make it very short or keep going forever and ever and ever and ever, because both of those things make you very nervous and are not a very good way to communicate. So, and that's something you can Google. STAR.
Absolutely. And my experience with potential candidates is also through exercises. I would add to what you're saying. Search for this STAR model of answering questions and just exercise it really with people, with network, with family members or friends, and maybe somebody who is in the same situation, and really exercise, practically simulate the interview. Because in this way, you are in the situation of an interview. You think about this. Your unconscious is working for you, and started to think, okay, if I say this, I would like to say that, and speak it out, pronounce it, so that you listen to yourself, and maybe you can also record it, so that after that you can see yourself. So this is something that's there are a few exercises just in order to do this, in order to prepare yourself.
And one thing that I would add to that as well is that I think it's very important to stay very close to yourself in terms of your examples, right? So there are a lot of examples that sometimes people are thinking about when they talk about the STAR methodology, answering questions. Stay close to yourself, because your own story, there's a lot of examples around that. And if you don't know, talk to your mom, your sister, your brother, your friends, because they have a lot of examples that you think, oh, I didn't even think about it that way. So that's what I've also shared with people as well. Stay very close to yourself and ask people around you, hey, am I a good team player? And do you know example that I've demonstrated that? And they will tell you.
That's another way of leveraging your network. That's excellent. Yeah.
Exactly. Yes, it's an absolutely good idea. I also mentioned this. Prepare concrete example supporting your answers. So this is for the third step Kobi was talking about at the beginning of this talk, so that you can show also yourself how you are, how do you react on situation, and what's your mood, or how do you do it practically, so that the people get to know you a little bit more. Okay, are we missing something? Are we forgetting something? I see the time. Yeah, I see the time going down. Right.
I think we can talk for 3 hours about this. There's so much more to say, but these are very, very much the most important things.
Yeah. Do we have any questions from the audience, or was it okay?
I think we are. That's okay. I don't see them.
Okay.
Am I overviewing something? I don't think. We will be seen live. Don't worry. Okay. A lot of people will see us after this. I would like to mention immediately, in order to not forgetting this, that this is a live talk of Empower Amsterdam, and in 2 weeks it will be another one. Also within the series of inspiration for 2021, and this will be the name of the next one will be Where is Your Focus, and this will be on the 16th of February exactly. Thank you so much. Coming up, Where is Your Focus? Great. I think that's what I can do is thank you both for the nice conversation, inspiring thoughts and exchange.
You're very welcome. Thanks for having me and us. And everyone watching, good luck with your interviews. You're going to do great.
Exactly. Enjoy it. Thank you so much.
Thanks for having us.
Great. Thank you. Right. Nice. Bye, I think. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Ciao. Ciao.